Hey guys, so today I'm going to be taking you through like a full raw workflow. I'm going to show you guys how I work and exactly what I do. So first things first, we're going to be editing these images over here. Let me pull them up for you. Now I normally, sometimes depending on what I'm doing, if it's more than one photo, say I'm like batch editing, I tend to use Capture One. For this purpose I'm going to use Capture One, but if I was editing a single image, I would just use Photoshop Raw. Sometimes I'll still load them up in Capture One just for the simple fact that Capture One has some things I like that Photoshop doesn't do. But anyways, let's get on with this. So first things first is you want to import your photos. Let's do choose desktop. Review for import. Okay, now we have these two photos. Now, the goal is to get the photo to this, but I can't remember exactly what I did. I remember a little bit of what I did because my workflow stays the same pretty much. But sometimes I add things, sometimes I don't do things. But yeah, we're gonna take this photo to this, and then you guys would be able to use this on pretty much any photo. It's pretty standard. As you can see, it's vastly different. So first thing we're gonna do is raise the shadows. Now we could either raise the exposure, or we could raise the shadow or the blacks or shadows in high dynamic range. So we're gonna try high dynamic range first. So maybe 40. We'll raise the exposure just a bit. Do 0.15. Go and raise the highlights. It's maybe 35. I'm gonna go ahead and raise the blacks more than the shadows. I think that matters more. So we'll keep this at like 15. We'll raise the blacks to like 40, 45. Let's try 45. Don't stress about it too much. It looks ugly right now, but we're gonna add some contrast back in later because I don't like getting rid of my blacks fully. And the reason for that is because when you have solid black in your image, at least somewhere, it tends to pop more rather than having overexposed. So my photos kind of lean to the darker side, more low-key, I guess you could say. But yeah, so we're gonna add contrast later through clarity, adding contrast, and dodging and burning even. So don't stress about it too much. It looks a little bland, but we'll get that right. And then normally I add some clarity in this, but since it's a portrait, I won't add too much because we're gonna add more later. So I'm gonna add like 7. Now we're gonna take this image into Photoshop. We're always gonna make it brighter, so don't worry. But this is a good starting point, I think. I'm actually gonna bump the exposure just a little bit. Let's see what the auto gives me. Auto gives me 1.37. I think that's a generous amount. So let's go. Let's do 50. 0.50. Now you can always change this later. Don't stress about it too much. Now we're gonna go ahead and right click and we're gonna edit with, browse. We're gonna go ahead and open this in Photoshop now. Now I did kind of the light work here. This is basically all I use Capture One for. I know Capture One does have pretty strong color grading techniques or tools, I guess. I haven't really messed with it yet. I definitely will later in future videos, but let's go ahead and open this in Photoshop. Now it's gonna ask you this TIFF. I keep it as TIFF uncompressed, max resolution, whatever, 16-bit. Depending on your camera, if you have a smaller sensor with less megapixels, you might want to use 8-bit, but 16-bit is good for me. I think this was shot with an A7R2. I don't know if it tells me, but A7R2 or A7 III, vastly different pixel sizes, but you know, Either one will work. Very, very nice. 24 megapixels is plenty half the time. But sometimes I like being able to crop, and it gives you a little more elbow room when you edit. So we have our basic layer here, the background. We're going to go ahead and add a layer. Now what I do is I don't rename these layers when I do it, but for the sake of this video, I'll rename it. We'll call this, or actually we're going to do it a little different. This is kind of working destructive, but I like it. I Control J, name this copy. You could do it a different way, but this is how I do it. Now, what I do on this layer is, we'll actually name it cleanup. We're going to do a light cleanup. So anything you don't want in your image, get rid of, but lightly. So we're not going to take care of the big things. We'll do that on later layers. So right now we're just going to do stuff like lint, like some acne. I use the healing brush. So you could use the other one if you want. This one just gives you a little more control. And for the sake of the video, just so it's like a complete workflow, I'm not going to edit any of this out. I'm going to leave it all in there so you guys can see it. I'm not going to speed it up either. So if you would like to see the part where I get done with this, just go ahead and fast forward the video. And this is the part you play music with and do whatever you want. I should have used a softer light. Harsher lights tend to bring out acne more. But yeah, this is pretty simple. You're just taking the you're just taking the good skin and putting it over the bad skin. Pretty simple, straightforward. Nothing too crazy. Anyone could do this. It just takes tedious time. But yeah. Now this is kind of more discoloration. This happens. Some people just have different skin tones on their face, or the lighting hit on this side of the face more, and because of the shape of their face, it doesn't hit all the areas evenly, so it creates some discoloration. Now we could easily fix this if you wanted to later on. I'm going to be using the retouch panel. It's Beauty Retouch V3, but you could do this without it, just a little longer. I try to speed flow my process as quick as possible, so because I put a lot of effort in my photos, so anything that speeds that process up for me and I could still get similar quality, I try to do. So keep that in mind. I used to do it by hand, where I'd create the frequency separation layer, but it just takes so much time, and I forget sometimes, and I have to look it up. So this saves me a lot of times. I use this, but we'll be able to fix any discoloration. Say they had rosy cheeks and you didn't want rosy cheeks in your image, you could fix that too. Right now we're just getting simple stuff, and if you're not sure to get rid of it or not, I usually don't get rid of scars, moles, stuff of that nature, just because that's defining characteristics of people. Like, I wouldn't get rid of that unless I was specified to. But yeah, this image is looking great already. Good rule of thumb, I guess, is to get anything that seems like it's protruding. You don't have to go crazy or overboard. And what I'm doing, by the way, is I'm holding Alt, clicking the good skin, copying it over the bad skin. Now, you could just hold it once. Actually, that was a freckle. You could just hold it once and then do it, but you're gonna have the same piece of skin everywhere and it starts to look weird. So I try to take a new sample every click. You don't have to be too specific. You can be very general. Good thing to think about is to zoom out and look at your picture, because your picture is going to be viewed this way half the time, especially if you're uploading on mobile devices. Like, I sometimes get too overboard and I try to edit down to this layer, but when you edit like down to this layer, no one really sees this, so it's kind of pointless. But you know, it gives you clarity, so you can do that. So it's always good practice to edit at a wide view where you see the whole image, so you know what you're doing. And also because you could easily warp someone's face on accident if you weren't paying attention, you were just zoomed in too close. So now we're going to get rid of some of the lint. You might not be able to see this, but you know, it's bothering me. So lint, dog hair, stains, t-shirt stains, mustard stains. This is kind of what I use this layer for. Light cleanup. If it's really discolored, I'll do it in like a different layer if I can't get it, so don't stress about it. You can always come back to it. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. I think it's a good time to note too any flashy things like your model has on. So like this Apple Watch, when I dodge and burn this later, I'll brighten this up. You know, anything that like kind of adds, I guess, to the character. If they had earrings, I would brighten those earrings up. If it was a chain, these zippers are kind of nice. I might hit those zippers too. See how the light's hitting them. And you're probably wondering, this image is vastly different from this image. And some people would say, oh, you went overboard with this, the orange. You know, it's personal preference, I guess. But I did add some orange over here to fake some sunlight. And then I think I darkened this area just because it didn't aid in the story at all. It's kind of just there. So we'll get it more orange. This one is more on the dark side. So we'll try to replicate that. Maybe I'll keep some more shadows this time. So let's go ahead and continue. Photoshop. Okay, so stuff like this, see these sweat stains? My hat has those too, but let's just go ahead and clear those up. Shouldn't be too bad. No, anything you don't like. If he had longer hair in his face, I would clear that up, but his hair is pretty nice. That looks a little odd. Let's go ahead and redo that. And see, again, you can see I'm down to this deep layer that no one will see. But I just can't help it sometimes, guys. And if you do work in this deep of a layer, or I guess deep of the image, you're very zoomed in, just keep in mind, if you did it sloppy, like not perfect, they wouldn't even know because they're viewing the image way out here. So you could get away with more. This is why megapixels are important to some people, I guess, but you could get away with much more. I could work in this small area, change something, and then you're viewing the image out here, so you wouldn't even know because I'm changing little pixels. So it gives you more room to play with. That's the main reason for more megapixels, I believe. Other than that is cropping power, but if you know what you're going for all the time, it might just take a little more effort. 24 megapixels is fine. I'm gonna get rid of that just so it's a little cleaner. I guess I could get rid of this stain if I wanted to. Might look a little weird. Let's see. That doesn't look bad. It's a skateboard, so it's supposed to be beat up, right? We'll just cover that, and then we'll leave it like that. Pretty much everything else I think I'm gonna leave. So this is the cleanup layer. You can see what we did. Let me go a little closer. I think there's some hairs on his beard there. Alright, no, that's fine. We'll go ahead and leave that. So yeah, we'll go ahead and move on. So I'm gonna do new layer, image, apply image. Okay, so that just merges these bottom layers, so I don't have to worry about them. So now you can see that. So we're gonna call this final cleanup. So now we're on to the final cleanup. Now we're gonna do some more advanced techniques. This is where I'm gonna use my panel. You don't have to use a panel. You could do this by hand. What I'm about to do right now is called frequency separation. That's gonna give you this little action. It's the same thing if you did it by hand. It just automates it. You could download the action online just to make it simpler, or get a panel like this. Now what you want to do is not see any texture of the skin. So this would I see a little bit of wrinkles, so I'm going to add a little more. I tend to go more to the softer side if it's a female. If it's a male, I try to keep some of that ruggedness, a little more texture, just because those are aspects people like when looking at their photos. So we'll go ahead and let's do 9. I'm gonna keep it at 9, 9.8. Now I'll split it up in a few layers. This is the texture layer, this is the color and tones, and then this is your work layer. So I would say this is where I do most of the work, is on this correcting tones layer. And it's literally what it says. You're going to take a brush. I usually turn my brush down to maybe 16, maybe even lower. You gotta play with it. Get a soft brush, so soft round brush. And then we're gonna take some samples, and it's pretty straightforward. Same thing, you're going to sample this, and it's going to take an average of the skin samples in this area. So I'm going to take the average of the skin in this circle. So average, that's the tone it's going to give me. I'm going to paint. So it's pretty straightforward. Now, you could keep doing it and just keep taking some samples. And you're like, nothing's happening yet. Yes, because I'm not doing it heavy-handed. I'll go ahead and do it heavy-handed real quick. You can see, you could easily start to shape the model's face like this. So that's why you have to be careful. So what I'm going to do is add some brightness here. So I'm going to try to sample some of the brighter skin. You could just hold Alt and then look for a good average, but I want to brighten up where light would naturally hit. So right here is where the light would naturally hit. Right here, looked a little bad, so I'm gonna do it again. Kind of blend it in more. The more samples you take, the better the image. Remember that. I guess the more it blends, I guess you could say. So that's what I got so far. Now you can see I literally completely reshaped his forehead. We could go ahead and toggle this on and off. So remember those skin areas I told you about earlier? Let's go ahead and add a new layer here to give you a visual representation. Oh, maybe I can't do that. Anyways. Those layers I told you are those areas of the skin that were not as smooth. You could fix it with this. So say the light was hitting, his skin was a little bumpy at the moment, given the angle. The light could have hit him flat and be really flattering. You could soften that out and fix that in Photoshop. That's pretty revolutionary. If you knew that, you could pretty much create almost any image with any light source. Now obviously it helps if you have a little bit of everything there, so maybe if it wasn't just a straight contrasty image you wouldn't be able to do it, but if you have a little bit of room to work with and a little bit of detail in all of the face, you can work with it and create an image that you wish you had in camera. And it's pretty crazy to do, because you could take even a shitty light and create something with an absolutely beast of a light, I guess, or lighting setup. So now this is a Rembrandt right here, so I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of extend this maybe a little bit. Let's see if I can. There we go. Now as you can see, I'm spilling over on his eye too much. I don't like to do that because it kind of covers his eyeball. So what I'm gonna do is, there we go, let me blotch that out. But anyways, after I get done doing that, if you know you kind of spilled over on the eye, just zoom in with an eraser tool. Maybe erase it just to make sure. Not on him, but on females, I sometimes add eyelashes. You could copy them, you could draw them on. That helps a lot. So it's already looking like a better image, so let's go ahead and look at that. Now keep in mind other places the light hits, so his nose. It's usually the forehead, nose, upper lip, lower lip, and sometimes chin. Now his chin's not really getting hit, just his upper lip, so we'll just work on this. And I work similarly with dodge and burn, but right now we're just doing some cleanup. Let me get rid of that. So say you found something you want to get rid of, go to the texture layer. Now I use the lasso tool. Sorry, not the lasso tool, the patch tool for this. So I'm going to circle that, drag that, copy that, boom, done. So anything you see, you could go back and edit. The first layer is just to get the majority of it out the way so we have something to work with. But anything else that you think distracts from your image, take it away. If it doesn't help in the image, take it away. If it doesn't aid in your story at all, take it away. I'm dropping a bunch of gold nuggets this video. Hopefully you guys watch or just listen to it. Let's see. Take it away. Take it away. So anything you forgot to get out, there's always going to be stuff that you're like, oh shit, I didn't see that there. Take it away after. It's no big deal. So this is what we're working with right now. Let's go and look at it. Kind of reshaped his face. Now I'm going to paint in the shadows a bit. I think it's a good job so far. Let's go ahead and continue. Correcting tones. Go back to my brush. Let's go ahead and go to 27%. Enter. And now we don't want to go too heavy-handed. We're going to go ahead and zoom in here. So kind of lighten up the shadows a bit. I'm going to go ahead and leave that a little contrasty on him. You could do this technique with anything though. So say there's an area of the car you didn't like, you could do this technique there too. Or I've done it with, I think, bushes before or something. But keep that in mind. It's a great technique to use. I didn't use this low frequency tones, but this is just the same thing. So let's say we wanted to even out this area of the skin. We just select it, drag the skin we want, and then it kind of adjusts it. Gives you the average again, so it doesn't make a huge difference, but you know, those little differences add up. Alright, so now that we did that, we're going to go ahead and rename this. We're going to call this face, because we literally just worked on the face there. I mostly use that for the face only. So we're going to move on. The sun's over here, I think. Or no, not the sun. I have a flash over here, actually. But the sun is over here also, but I outpowered the sun just because it was close to sunset, I believe. Actually, no, the sun's over here, I think. It sets over here. That makes sense. So I'm hitting him from the back. There's a little sun coming from this way, highlighting his hair, highlighting everything over here you could see. My flash is to the right. We're going to keep that in mind just because when we play with the light, we don't want to put the light where it's not supposed to be because it doesn't look natural. So now we're going to go on to dodge. Now what dodge does is just brighten your image. You could do this in multiple ways. This action just makes it faster again. So we're going to go to brush. Let's do 25. We're just going to brush all this. Now we're going to go a little overboard. So if you're like, holy shit, that's a lot. Keep in mind that I will dial it down in the opacity layer. I don't touch the eyes yet. I have another tool for eyes, but it's the same tool. It just brightens them. So you could use this if you wanted to. I just like to keep the layers a little separate, just because if I wanted to go back and adjust one, it's easier to adjust the opacity of the layer than to redo it. So we're gonna go ahead and go here. I might always highlight this upper lip if the sun hits there. It usually does. I go a little harder too. The sun usually hits this upper lip pretty well. Lower lip it does too, depending on the person. So we're gonna go ahead and hit that too. There we go. If his teeth was in it more, were in it more, I would hit those with a whitener or brighten them too. But let's go and look at that from the back. Nice, very nice. I'm gonna get this right side a bit. You can see there's little eye wrinkles too. If you wanted to, you could clean those up on that layer we just did with the face, with the texture layer. Personally, I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna go ahead and leave those. I like a little ruggedness in there, I guess. And then that's pretty much it for the face. Now you're probably wondering again, this photo looks vastly different from this photo still. This photo is more contrasty, and I did add some digital skin texture, but I do that with the final edit, like the final thing. You don't have to add digital skin texture. I honestly don't know why I do. I kind of looks like the way it looks. It kind of gives you that grainy feel. But yeah, so that's it now. We're getting there for sure. Let's go ahead and look at all this together. So I'm going to Shift, Control, then Control G. So this is everything together. This is what we did so far. Pretty nice. Mostly just working on the face, but we'll work on some of the background areas now. So keep in mind where this light is. Now we're going to adjust it. So I just highlight. You don't have to be really special, especially if you're using a soft round brush like me. You can just highlight it. I'm going to hit the zipper a little bit just because it's more reflective, so it makes sense that it stands out. You know, it wouldn't be too out of place. And again, you don't have to be perfect. Let's go ahead and hit this watch. Let's go ahead and look at that a little more. Nice. If you didn't like any of this, you could always get the soft eraser tool, erase it in an area, or you could create individual layers and adjust everything individually. I'm going to keep it there. I'm going to just put a big soft round brush on this little brim just to make it stand out a bit. And then I think maybe right here a bit just to make the board pop a little more in the background. Everything's a little reflective right here, so we could keep that or ignore it if you wanted to. But I like to give things even a little push sometimes, so we're going to do that. That's how it's looking right now, so pretty substantial. We're still going to add though, so don't get crazy yet. But even that watch added a little glare. If you wanted to, you could harshen that shadow a little bit, or not harshen, soften that shadow. I'm personally going to leave it there. I think I like it the way it looks. But yeah, so let's go ahead and continue on. Now we're going to go on to the burn layer. And you can do this pretty easily as well. There's a burn tool over here, dodge and burn tool. So you could use those just on a separate layer. This just makes it easier to adjust, and you could always adjust the curve. If you wanted to, you could do it manually. I don't really care for manual anymore after years of doing it. But let's go ahead and do this. You can see how drastic that makes the image. Darkening things, I try not to go too ham with sometimes, but it does add depth. It makes your image pop more. So I enjoy darkening than I guess I would say brightening. Just that alone made his arm pop more, gave it more three-dimensionality. So keep that in mind whenever you're doing stuff. Even if you were to do it, say his lips were closed, I would darken the lips, the line of the lips, just because it would make his lips pop more. I usually do that on females, but if his lips were closed, I would do it on him too. Why not? So always darken anything that's next to some light. It'll really help your images. So if you wanted to, you'd see how his hair is lighter right there. I could darken this, and it would pop more. See how his face right here is a little in the shadows. I'm going to do this a little less, but his face will pop more after this. I guarantee it, guys. Let's go ahead and do it. And mostly through editing, you just have to be able to see light. If you could see the light, you could make a fucking amazing image. Just know where the light goes, follow the light, and then shape it, reshape it, do whatever the heck you want to it. But just know where it's going and know what you want it to do. So I hit some of his lip right there, maybe even some out of here. So we're just going to clean that up, because I don't want to darken his lips at all. If you wanted to, say his lips were a little pale in the photo, you could select them and make them a little more pink. I've done that. I've done that to a fish before. There's a Finding Nemo type image I had, and the clownfish was really dull. So I just painted color on him. Poor fish, but made the image 10 times better, 100%. Let's go and look at what we did. So it added a little emphasis to the image. If you wanted to, you can go a little more. I'll try it. Just for the sake of the video. I know this is a long video, guys, but I'm trying not to cut anything out that people would need. So I like to see a raw workflow. There we go. Let's look at that. Now that's very harsh. I'm personally not going to do it that much because I'm going to add contrast later. So I'm going to press Ctrl-Z. But this is a good starting point. So we have detail here in his face still. It's not too dark. It's a little dark on this side. That's okay. For the most part, I don't want it too harsh. I want to be able to see his face. If this was a scary movie, then maybe I would make it super dark or something. But, you know, this is amazing. I'm loving this already. So it's going to continue. We're going to mess with the eyes now. I'm not going to touch anything else just so this video is not too long. But let's go ahead and continue to the eyes. Now this one it's called Magic Eyes. It just makes a dodge layer. So you're just going to brighten it basically. You could even do this by like painting white or just brightening, I guess. So we're going to go ahead and throw this on top. And you guys could see already how big my images get. So right now we're at 1.76 gigabytes for a file. Now you can't save a file like this. So if you wanted to save it, you would have to merge all these and then save it. So I try not to, if I'm going to do a long edit, I try not to leave in the middle of it just so I can have more control over my image. You kind of do need a decent computer as well. That's one thing I forgot when starting out. I would sit here trying to edit gigabytes of images and then my PC would have a stroke. But yeah, sometimes I touch on the whites. His whites aren't really visible, so we're not going to touch them, guys. But on an image like this, you could also darken the round of his eyes. So let's go ahead and go to 100% and just follow that black line. Now that will add a little bit. Look at that. That's pretty crazy. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and lighten this this up. So actually I'm gonna do this one first and I'll lighten it. Dang. It's gonna go to 50 maybe. I forgot what I did on that side. But anyways, let's go and look at that. I'm actually going to do this eye a little less, just because it's already darker naturally. This light's in the sun. This one's kind of a little off. So we'll just do that one slightly. I'm going to tone this down. Maybe 30. Just because I like to do everything subtle. I don't like everything to pop as crazily. Just for the simple fact it looks more natural. So we're going to continue. What else could we do? We could do hair highlights. We could do another dodge layer. We have just a hair highlight button. It's just a dodge layer. Doesn't really make a difference. But I'm just going to highlight some of his hair. The hair that the sun's already hitting, I guess. Then we're going to tone that down. There we go. Look at this. This is looking like an amazing image already. Oh my god. Now, we could continue to play with this till it gets perfect. I usually play with them longer. I'm trying to speed this up so everyone doesn't get bored. But I'm not going to touch on him anymore. He is how he is now, guys. Normally, I would. You might find something later. You're like, oh, I should have got that. Go back and get it. Doesn't matter, really. You could probably still pull it off half the time. But now we're going to kind of add some final touches that I like to do. So let's say I complete this to the best of my ability, the person. Then I try to do the final touches, and the final touches are a little more complex. I use some compositing techniques, but we're going to go ahead and name this retouch, because this is just the retouch layers. Oh, misspelled that. Anyways, we're moving on. So we're going to click a new layer, image, apply image, and all this does is it just copies everything on this bottom layer and gives it to me on a simple layer. So there we go. Now we're going to do this, the new background. We're going to call it background 2.0. Back 2.0, enter. Oh, spelled that wrong. Now we're going to press Control J. Now this is a copy. I'm going to keep this backup just in case I mess up somewhere. And we're going to make a selection. Now sometimes the Photoshop gods are nice to me, and I just press select subject and it selects them perfectly. Let's see. Cross your fingers. You know, it's okay. It's not too bad. But I'm going to go ahead and widen this selection because I want the entire cake here, except this little area. Actually, we could just do that a better way. Watch. We can go ahead and use the pen tool. Now this is where it gets a little tedious. If you're not familiar with the pen tool, it's okay. I wasn't forever. I was like, I hate this, and I still hate it. Now I kind of understand how to use it, so it's not as bad. I think the big part of my Photoshop journey was stop being a freaking perfectionist, because you could always hide stuff. You could always fix stuff later. Don't spend a million days on it. And you could always feather this too, so don't get too caught up on it. And all I'm going to do is just darken the background. You could probably do it simpler, but I like to be a little tedious sometimes. God, this video is going to get long. Also, if you guys have any questions, I could probably help you. Just ask them if you get stuck somewhere. Like, how do you use the pen tool? So I'm gonna click here. Oh, let's go ahead and get this corner first. I'm gonna click here, and it kind of makes a straight edge every time. This doesn't matter right here because there's no curves. But let's say we go all the way down here. I'm gonna click here, and I'm gonna drag it. Now that's gonna make the line curve slightly. You just have to play with it. You'll get better at it for sure. But this one's pretty easy. It's a pretty simple selection. And then you gotta just go out, 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 back in. Selection. Let's press Control J. Alright, see how it selected the back? Or just the front? We're gonna go ahead and do it a bit different. Actually, we could do it like this. So we're gonna call this the top. We're gonna call this the back. Or let's do bottom. Now I'm gonna apply a exposure clipping mask. Let's go ahead and clip that as a clipping mask, so it'll just affect this bottom layer. So we're just gonna darken that. You're like, oh, why is it only affecting that area? Well, the reason it's doing that is because we have this top area canceling the overall darkness of the bottom area. So if we took this top area out, this is what the image looks like, but we put this top area on top of it, so it just adds that. Now, I'm not going to do it too much, just because why? But just so it looks a little natural, just darken it, maybe a few exposure stops, just because it doesn't really add to the center of the image. It doesn't add to the subject of the image, so why do we need it? You can see what you need to see. It gives you a little information, but nothing more. So this one, we're going to go ahead and add a little brightness to it. So when we're now working on the top layer, we can do exposure, so this layer is a little brighter. If you wanted to, you could even add some vibrance. So we're going to add some vibrance, just so this layer is a little brighter. I'm just adding a little blue in there, so I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm just going to add maybe 10. You can add some saturation. I'm not going to go too crazy as well. Maybe 2, 3. Okay, we're up to 2.47 gigs. So let's just keep on trucking, guys. Let's go ahead and look at this. We'll do Control G. So this is everything we have together. You can see how the image is really shaping now. I'm really just giving away all my secrets, huh? But yeah, it's really coming together. We'll just call this back work. And I really just added that little push. You don't need, this wasn't necessary, but I like to do stuff like that. So now we're gonna do a image, apply image. We're gonna call this the asset layer. And why do I call it the asset layer? It's because we're gonna add some assets to it. So this is the part where it would differ. I have some tools, so I'm gonna go to my media drive, assets. I have some Photoshop tools, overlays. You could find these online, free. You could buy them, whatever. It doesn't matter. I like to use light hits, and then there's an action for it. I kind of do it by hand, just because why not? And what I'm gonna do is fake sunlight. So I obviously have my strobe over here. Remember, because we talked about this. So we're gonna go ahead and press overlay. Oh no, not overlay, sorry, screen. I'm gonna press screen, and it's gonna act as the sun. So we're gonna go ahead and you can do something light, not to be too crazy, maybe 5. We could do 10. I usually go very subtle on this. You can go as crazy as you want, to be honest, but it doesn't really matter. You know, it's food. You just season it to how you want it. Now, since this area is warmer naturally and this area is naturally cooler, I'm just gonna emphasize this a little bit. So I'm gonna add a blue light to the back of him. And when you have contrasting lights like this, especially colors, there's a few forms of contrast you should keep in mind: color contrast, light contrast, and texture contrast. Now we're gonna add maybe 15 over here, and it just makes it really pop more. Personally, I try to do this as much as possible. Sometimes it's naturally happen, sometimes it doesn't naturally happen. You know, say there's a sunset, and then there's a tree where there's some blue shade. It kind of naturally happens a lot, but it just makes your center of your image pop more, gives it more dimensionality. Anything that is contrast will make your image pop. So you're like, oh, that did nothing. You're probably right. So let's go ahead and Control G, merge these. We're gonna call this the top, and then we're just gonna we're gonna press new layer, image, apply image, and this layer will have everything we did. So now we could just throw all these in a layer. We'll just call this hard work. work. You can see I'm misspelling words, but I'm up to 3.8 gigs now. Most computers would die. So now we're just gonna add finishing touches. Control J. You could slap a filter on this if you wanted to. You could do it manually. I personally do a little bit of both. So what does this image need? I would add a little bit of warmth. Contrast for sure. Maybe 10. Some clarity. Some texture. Some highlights. Actually, let's do exposure. See how the shadows are little, it feels bland. That's because there's no blacks. So we could add some blacks in there. And it just has to do with the color contrast. Usually image appears sharper if it's more contrasty. Contrast makes your image pop. Don't forget that. Don't just go ham on the contrast slider though, because then it'll do a bunch of stuff you don't want. Like this, I want to keep some shadow in his, some detail, I mean, in this area. It also tells you up here, but we'll just go ahead and add a little more. 20. Let's go ahead and stay at 20. I think that's good. Keep in mind, if you add some clarity, it'll give you more contrast as well. So it's just something to keep in mind. You can add some vibrance if you wanted to. What I did before is I added that grain on his face, or digital skin texture, as you know. This red just means it's clipping over here, so that means there's no detail here. If you wanted to get rid of that, you could just drop it down. I personally don't think that matters, so I'm gonna leave that. And that's pretty much it. You could get a little more technical in the color grading panel. I kind of already do something I like, so I'm going to press OK. This is my basic corrections. So this is basic, and I like to keep these separate just because I can always adjust them later or delete layers. Now we're going to call this color. Now with your color, you could do whatever you want. This is what I was talking about earlier. We got the basic, everything's done that we want. Now it's just the final touches. Now you could play with this, get your color exactly. You could do some presets like this. They're pretty outrageous sometimes. I never find a preset I like. I have a bunch. Here's some that I use that I made myself. They work for me. Just because I guess I made them and I know how to adjust them. So we're gonna go ahead and find what I like. I'm really liking this one. It gives a different edit. I used this one on a couple shoot. So let's go and look at what it did. So this is what it's doing. Let's see what we don't like. So what we don't like is all that fucking detail, I would say. Maybe the whites. Let's tone down. No, the whites were okay. Shadows. No. If you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, you just click OK if you want, and you can just scale back the opacity, so it just adds it a little bit slightly. I don't know what happened there. My computer's working overtime, sorry guys. This is a pretty big fucking file now. We're up to 4.28. Normally I would merge these so my computer doesn't have a stroke, but for the point of the video, I will not. So this is the color we just added. I usually do this, so I just scale it back. So 100% is too much. 40 is okay. Let's go a little higher. I'm liking 50. I personally think 70 is too much. Some people might like 70. This is where a lot of people differ. But you know, you just scale it to where you like it. I'm gonna stay at 60. So that's it. This is everything with Control G. Um, 428 is the final gigabyte size. And this is everything we did, guys. Now there's some things I would go back and do, maybe a few of these. Some things really pop out, some mistakes pop out when you add a bunch of clarity, so keep that in mind. You could have smoothed his skin out more, but you know, that's okay. I don't mind that. Everything else seems pretty fine. I think this is a strong composition though because of these lines. That's one thing to keep in mind, but other than that, guys, we're done. So let's go ahead and do a recap. Retouch the face, do some compositional work. Maybe that means making your subject pop out more from the background, etc. Make them more vibrant, brighter, whatever. And then this top work would just be some final touches. Add some lighting if you want, some flares. In the original, I added a flare right here. We can go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and show you guys that. Let me merge everything though so my computer doesn't blow up. Merge group. Okay, so now we have this. Let's go and just throw on a flare. I have a few different ones. Let's go ahead and get it out of here. We'll do overlays, natural light leaks. Let's try one of those. Let's just add some stuff to your image. Like you could throw this on here. Do that. Let's do screen, and we could always change the saturation of this, guys. So we go to hue saturation, clipping mask, and we could change that to something we want. So we can make it look like a sun even more, a sun from the back. It's actually pretty cool. Control the lightness too. That's pretty cool. I actually like that a little more. Okay. Then that would be the complete final edit. You could adjust this too if you wanted to get a little more technical. I think that's fine, but you could do stuff like that. If you wanted to get really crazy, oops, you could make it just a composite and just do every area different, but I usually just composite lighting unless I'm going for like a specific print or something. But this is the final. Let's look at that. Capture 1. Capture 1's a little different. It's a little darker contraster. I personally like the one I just did, the new one, just because I think I went too crazy on the shadows or the darkness and just kind of took them away. But this one's definitely more noticeable. Maybe a little darker in the shadows, but I don't want to go as dark as I did in the first one. So overall, a good image. That's it, guys. Hopefully that wasn't too long. It's almost an hour video, but I just wanted to give you guys some raw workflow from Capture One to Photoshop. If it was a bigger project, say I'm batch editing like real estate photos, I'll go from Lightroom to Capture One, and then from Capture One I'll go into Photoshop if I need to. Most of the time I don't need to with those photos, but say there's like blood on the wall, and I'm gonna Photoshop it out, obviously. But yeah, that's it, guys. That's all there is to it. I'll have this uploaded by the end of the day, hopefully. Take care.